Hey everyone, in this video we're going to cover some of the basic gear you'll need for performing live. Everyone's setup is going to look a little bit different depending on what type of instrument you play or if you're a vocalist, and of course how elaborate your show is. But there is some basic gear that you'll want to be at least familiar with, whether you're using something the venue is providing or whether you're purchasing your own gear and bringing it along with you to a show. I actually don't own a whole lot of gear for live performance because a lot of what we use for my show is very standard and most performance venues are going to be able to provide the majority of what I need. There are some pros and cons to owning your own gear versus just using whatever a venue has. A big pro is that you can get much more of a consistent sound and look when you're traveling with all of your own gear versus using whatever the venue happens to own. But a big con is that you then have to purchase that gear yourself and then travel with it, or you have to rent that gear, and both of those options are expensive. For most of you just starting out, this isn't only impractical, but it's also probably not going to be in the budget for you to purchase a lot of these things yourself. I still only travel with a few pieces of gear and then just rely on the venue to provide the rest of what I need, and a lot of that has to do with the cost as well as the fact that I either travel alone or usually with only one other person, so it's incredibly difficult to travel with all of those things by yourself or with just one other person. This is why having a contract and technical or tech rider is so important, because in there you can list out the type of gear that you'll need the venue to provide in order for you to put on your show. I've given you guys a sample tech rider to download at the end of this section so you can see what types of things you might want to include in there depending on what you need for your show and what you're personally bringing along. The main gear that I bring to every show is of course my violin, my wireless system, and my laptop computer for running my videos and backtracks. Sometimes if I'm playing at a convention or something where I'm not really sure whether or not they're going to have a professional enough sound system, I'll also bring along a small DI box and small reverb pedal, because reverb is the one effect that I feel like I have to have on my violin when I perform, so I don't want to be without it. Touring was a little different, and besides that gear I just mentioned, we also would bring our own projector and screen for displaying videos because it was more economical to own and bring those along than it would have been to rent them for 25 shows in a row. But when I just go out for one or a couple of shows at a time, I don't travel with the projector and screen, so in my tech rider that's something that I require from whoever is booking me for the show. In my tech rider I have different sections outlining what I require the venue to provide for the show, including front of house sound, stage specifications, on-stage monitors, lighting, video projection and screen, microphones and DIs, on-stage electrical, and then some other requirements like sound check, a secure area to store my personal belongings during the show, and my post-performance signing line specifications. It's honestly a pretty basic tech rider, but it covers all the bases that I need in order to put on my show, so I just don't want to overcomplicate it. Depending on the venue, they may or may not have everything in-house that you need for your show. So if they don't have something, like for example in the past, a lot of venues haven't had a projector or a screen for my videos. So like I said, when we toured, I brought those and traveled with them, but now when I just do one or two shows at a time, I've had to rent those things for an additional cost. Anything the venue doesn't own, you'll have to bring with you or rent. And when you have to rent those types of things, you can get really ripped off in terms of pricing. The last time I played some shows and had the venues rent the projector and screen for me, it was over $300 for just one show, whereas the projector itself only costs $1,500. So you can see that if you're doing a lot of shows in a row, it just makes sense to buy something like that and then bring it with you, because you'll end up saving quite a bit of money that way. Sometimes though, when you're just going out for one or two shows and you're traveling alone or with just one other person, it's just too much of a hassle to bring some of those bigger items along, especially if you're traveling internationally. We've covered this in the making money with your music section of this course, but you can't really expect to make a lot of money with live shows, and especially early on, it'll be more about trying to break even than trying to earn money. Performing your own ticketed live shows is just expensive, and there's not a lot of money in it until you get further along and are able to play larger venues and charge more for your tickets. Anyway, I just wanted to mention a couple of pieces of gear that I've used that I can recommend to you guys, because what I end up bringing to every show now is pretty basic and very affordable, so it might be something that you want to check out too. For instruments that have a pickup, I really love the Line 6 Relay G10 wireless system. It's the easiest wireless system system I've ever used, and it's been really reliable for the shows that I've played in both the US and Europe. I also really love that you don't have to wear a separate battery pack to use this. You literally just plug it into your instrument and you're good to go. It's super straightforward to operate. You just plug the unit into an outlet to power it on, plug the transmitter into the receiver to charge it, and the charge lasts up to 8 hours, so definitely the duration of a show. The receiver automatically figures out the best channel to operate on, so you don't have to manually set that, and you can plug into an amp or front of house system through an XLR or 1/4 inch output. The transmitter has a 1/4 inch connector, and while it's marketed as a guitar wireless system, it'll work with a lot of other instruments or pickups as long as they have a 1/4 inch jack. It only costs around $170 depending on where you buy it, and for the reliability and ease of use, I really don't think you can go wrong with this. In the past, for my very first tour, I owned a Shure ULX D4 wireless system, and it was super reliable but a lot more expensive at around $1,000 at the time. In order to hook it up to my instrument, I had to wear a battery operated pack, which I'm not a huge fan of, and there's also a lot more manual configuring that you need to do in terms of setting the unit up, so it was more expensive and more complicated to deal with than the Line 6 Relay G10. However, if you don't play an instrument with a pickup, or you'd rather use an instrument microphone like a DPA 4099 or something like that, you won't be able to use that with the Line 6 Relay. You'll need a different wireless system like the Shure ULX D4. The advantage of using a pickup is that it's a lot easier to deal with and generally isn't as prone to feedback as a microphone is. I used a DPA instrument mic for a few of my live shows in the past, and while I loved the sound, it just really picked up a lot of feedback, especially when I was using on-stage monitors as opposed to in-ear monitors. Since I don't use in-ear monitors anymore, and I just love the ease of use of the Line 6 wireless system, I always just choose that now when I perform, but you definitely have a lot of other options if you want a different setup. Another main thing I wanted to cover here is on-stage monitors versus in-ear monitors. Again, big pros and cons to both, but I just wanted to cover a couple of things here since that's another huge thing that you need to consider with your gear setup. If you plan on using stage monitors, also referred to as wedges or wedge speakers sometimes, then that's something that you want the venue to provide for you. You don't want to try and travel with those, and every venue should have plenty of those to provide. I usually like to have two set up in the middle of the stage with some space between each speaker, and this is something that I specify as a requirement in my Tech Rider since I don't bring these along. When I toured, I used an in-ear monitor system instead, and honestly, there are some nice advantages to using in-ear monitors versus on-stage monitors, but I could never get fully comfortable with having my ears completely blocked. If you want to go this route, you can get more basic in-ear monitors that are a standard size, or if you want to spend more money, you can get really high quality in-ear monitors that are a custom mold of your ears so that they fit perfectly in your ear and block out any outside noise. Some of the pros of using in-ear monitors are that you get to really dial in a precise mix in your ears. You're not picking up any external noise, so you can get very specific as to what exactly you want to be hearing. There are some pretty cool systems that you can buy that work with iPads and smartphones where you can actually control your mix directly from stage with those devices, so that's a huge plus if you need to discreetly change a volume level in the middle of a show, and I did that a ton when I used in-ear monitors. You also won't need to use on-stage monitors, which means you'll be less prone to feedback on stage, which is nice. And because you're hearing everything directly in your ears, you can run around on stage, face different directions, spin around, whatever, and your sound will stay exactly the same. Whereas if you try to do that when you're listening to on-stage monitors that are stationary, it'll really affect the sound you're hearing depending on the direction you're facing. Some of the cons of in-ear monitors, though, are that the nice ones are expensive, and you need a separate wireless system and battery pack if you want to use them wirelessly, which can also be expensive. For my first tours, I bought a pair of in-ear monitors from JH Audio that were custom made to my ears, and they cost around $1,000. While they were really high quality and sounded great, I just never got comfortable with not being able to hear my violin directly from my own ear. If you've been through my audio recording and production part of this course, then you know that I like to record with only one headphone cup covering my right ear, and I like to leave my left ear uncovered so I can still hear my violin directly from my left ear. I actually did that same thing with my in-ear monitors where I only wore my right monitor and not my left, but I ended up driving the volume level up way too high on my right ear and started to hurt my hearing, so I only did that for a few shows and then forced myself to wear both. I just never got used to how isolated my hearing was with with those monitors, and I always felt really nervous about my intonation on my violin, so that's why I no longer use them. All right, so those are the main things that I wanted to cover here in this video in terms of basic performance gear, because I think those will apply to all of you guys. But remember, your setup might look way different from mine, and the main takeaways here should be that whatever gear you don't own or plan on bringing to your show, you should list as a requirement in your tech rider so you can make sure that you'll have it for your performance, whether the venue provides it or has to rent it on your behalf. See you guys in the next video.